Hey everyone, welcome back to Locked In. Today we're going to build off of an earlier show that we featured last week when we talked about the standout defensive tackle for Michigan Wolverines, Kenneth Grant. Today we're going to move just slightly down the line to talk about his counterpart at defensive tackle, Mason Graham. A lot of people are really high on Mason Graham. Some even think that he could be a high round draft pick. The I think that when you look at these two, what we're going to get into tonight is it's going to be really a tale of two tackles for Michigan. And whereas Grant is a behemoth, basically 6'4" 340 pounds, give or take. Um, Graham is not. Graham he's a more, I think, prototypical, just big end looking guy. Like if you're thinking back to like 1990s football, that's probably where he could play. Maybe if you're a little bit lighter, but his weight is pretty good for the interior defensive line. 314 pounds, 6'3". He's a big guy. And one of the things that you'll notice, I think, as we go through this film tonight, Mason Graham is he's an athletic guy. He's scrappy. So a lot of times it might not be him dominating at the line of scrimmage, but he's got a motor. He makes some good plays. He can get after the passer, and he's even the kind of guy that you could run on a twist stunt and put on the outside to add some versatility to what your defensive front is doing. So with that being said, guys, let's jump into it. Where do we want to begin?
Yeah, we'll begin right here, and you'll see Mason Graham in the middle, going on this center one on one in a pass rush situation, and just look at where the center's at right here. Here's the blue line, the line of scrimmage, and here's where the center's at. We'll say he's right here. All right, just looking at that, and we're gonna see where he goes in this play. So Mason Graham's gonna get a good pass rush, bull rush, walk him 5 yards back. I mean, absolutely hose him down right here to where he's even with Drew Hour, the quarterback. And it's one thing to do that, but you still have to make the tackle. So what does he do? He sheds him, gets off, makes the tackle. Now Drew Hour still gets 2, 3 yards, but the thing is, it's 3rd and 5 right now. So he's falling up 4th and 2. It's going to be short. So good stop right here to get the pressure to force the run and then make the tackle before he gets a first down. So good job right there by him.
So with this bull rush, I mean, he got back there pretty quickly. What would y'all attribute that to? Because I mean, he has great get off. I mean, that's some speed for a defensive tackle getting off the line.
I mean, it's something that's pretty common. I think it was we've been watching the Michigan film with their tackles, their defensive linemen, just steady pursuit and aggressive attack into the body or the shoulder or the side. Like whenever we saw Grant do something similar where he just kept a forward lean, kept an onslaught of an attack, fighting with his hands. His hands got out front. He engaged, and then he just kept on moving and pushing a guy back, and the guy couldn't really get his footing. Same thing kind of here. He puts his hands out. He engages heavily. He keeps on pressing forward and pressing his guy away from him. But then, he doesn't get the sack here. But I am impressed with his disengagement. So he engages this guy 5 yards back, or almost six, and we see like violent hands. And then as soon as he sees Drew Aller start to try and escape the pocket, he like gives a little shove to disengage off the center, and then he trails Aller, and then he makes a big stop. This should mean Aller could have dove here for a first down if he doesn't make this play. So it might have been close, but right there, you see that disengage his eyes while fighting a center in front of him. His eyes stayed on Aller. So as soon as he sees Aller go to escape the pocket, okay, this guy's not throwing anymore. I got to disengage. I got to get him because we've talked about a lot how they typically have kind of a trap set up for quarterbacks when they rush the passer. They didn't. They didn't really have that here, and I don't know if that's in the back of his head. I would assume that it is, where he's thinking, "Hey, we don't have our normal set here on this rush, so if he escapes, like I'm going to have to make a play," and he did. So I mean that was impressive. You got the nice bull rush, you got the nice attack and relentlessness, and then you have the good like heady smart play by him to recognize what he needed to do.
One of the things, excuse me, one of the things that I like about the bull rush right here, I had myself muted for a second, uh, is he doesn't make the mistake of trying to get off of the block too early. And I think what that does is he puts the burden on Aller to decide where he's going to rather than say pushing, working to one side, and then Aller being able to see that and take the other, take off. I think that by putting the center in Aller's lap, he makes Aller make a decision, and on top of that, Aller has to, like we've talked in other videos. Usually, you see this on defense, but he makes Aller, really run the hump, around
Mhm.
the center's rear end, and it kind of puts him at a position to where that Graham can disengage and then get an angle on him. So I mean, there's really a lot of intelligence that's being played out right here on this play. Um, and I'll tell you another thing, like when I see that right there, because he goes down and just absolutely just hog ties him. The thing that I really like about him in a position like that, when you see a guy hit the ground that quickly at that size, he was a really good wrestler in high school. And
Mhm.
that's something I think makes a huge difference, not just in knowing like how to how leverage works, how to get off blocks, how to engage with people. You know how to use your body different in wrestling, but the thing that happens when you see very good heavyweight wrestlers, they will get on the mat. They will throw takedowns. And when you watch him come through here, there's no hesitation. He doesn't do the typical big man thing, trying to reach out and grab the shoulders. He instantly shoots a single leg takedown basically and uses his long arms to grab him in. I mean, that's some good instinctive play. That's some athletic play, and you see a lot of, like, I think his best features come out, on that particular tackle.
Yeah, moving on, we'll see here the big difference being he's over here by himself because instead of that 5-man front, we see Michigan with the 4-man front this time. So, without Kenneth Grant on the field, without another body beside him, Graham has to be the main focus right here. And we'll see that right here when you roll it. So he gets doubled right off the jump. And, it's not easy to fight off a double or have anything done with a double. But you know what? He stands his ground. He stays at the line of scrimmage and he flows to the ball carrier outside. He gets turned, he finds them, and you know what? He comes in and he uses his hustle and athleticism, and he never gives up on the play, and he makes it about a yard and a half after the line of scrimmage. So I mean, what could have turned into a longer run? He gets his butt down the line of scrimmage and he stops this play along with two other Huskies.
So, I mean, the consistent theme right here is the guy's got a motor. I mean, that's something that you definitely see. Gets off of blocks well, uh, gets down the line. And I mean, on top of that, like you said, he finds the football, and that's not something a lot of times you think about with the defensive tackle, is finding the ball. But I mean, he does a great job of sniffing it out.
Yeah, his eyes are always trained on where the ball's going. That's something you can see consistently with him. Even when he's, there are plays that that we've seen and that we will see where he gets beat off of the ball by an offensive lineman, and yet while in the middle of that engagement, he's constantly tracking the ball and trying to get off that block to make a play downfield. And that's a consistent thing we've seen with Michigan as a whole, where these guys have great pursuit. Their pursuit drills are obviously very good because they always seem to have good angles and relentless tracking of where that ball is going. And he is no exception to that. He's incredible at finding where that thing is going and always continuing on trying to make a play even when it seems like it's out of reach. And he gets doubled for quite a bit right here, and then he still fights off that block. Guy goes to second level and he immediately gets off the one guy and is there to help force this play being made.
And that's something I think too that just runs through that Michigan defense is they all get to the football, because in that frame right there, if you look at by the end of that play, it looks like there's 9 people in there. There's 7 of them that were really in, close to the tackle. And I think there's something about that philosophy that's being taught is, I mean, there's more than one way to win on a play. And for defensive tackle, a lot of times, you're thinking you want to sack, you want to tackle for a loss, or, whatever. But right here, I mean, he shows you he comes, he goes down the line, fights that double team. Um, it's easy. I mean, I think that most linemen have been there. It's easy whenever you're getting double teamed by 2 big guys, just say, whatever. I mean, it's not, this play's not for me. So give credit to the guy for flowing down the line. He's fighting with him. He's taking that block on. It's impressive. I mean, that's just something I think that's a theme on this defense is there's more than one way to succeed, and they seem to find it. They have a very broad concept of what it means to win on a play, and I think that's why they wind up in so many good positions defensively.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And this dude can get after the pass. We've saw that, and he can flow down the line of scrimmage. But you see him here, and he can also be very big in the run game. You see him and Grant in the middle here. They got their heavy package in on the line, and look at that extension just off the jump. He gets his hands out onto
Mhm.
the lineman, makes that extension to look left and right. And I mean, just look at it. He has that gap with his eyes forward on the ball carrier, and he slings the lineman out of his way. And you know what he does? He makes this tackle right here. So he's very good at the run stop, too.
And the thing I like about that is, a lot of times you hear people talk about, I guess, two gapping, basically being able to play two gaps. Well, I mean, my thought about the best way to teach that a lot of times is exactly what Graham does. He doesn't two gap in the sense that he lines up head up and pops a man in the chest and is looking to both sides. But what he does is he makes the guard play a gap with his body. That gap's clogged.
A turn
And
right
so
there.
the running back cannot run through his own blocker. He has to go to the gap that Graham has worked out for himself, which is B gap. And so it's either you run dead into your own men or you try to make it through the obvious hole right here. But Graham's right there ready to rip off because once again, he's good at disengaging. And a lot of that has to do with he's got good reach. And so he gets his hands out first, meets that lineman in the chest, and is able to disengage quickly. And makes another really good low tackle. Great job.
Yeah, this dude can do it all. And you'll see him right here get some good pressure with the speed outside too. And he's even being held, and he still gets that sack against Ohio State. And I think that's a testament. Not only is this guy big and strong, this dude is fast. He gets outside on the edge here, uses his hands violent. He gets a rip and he gets a pull.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets through and he makes a sack right here, big sack, especially against Ohio State, rival game, close game. So I mean, gotta have it, and he gets it.
This isn't the
And
full. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Red.
Well, this isn't the full like running around the hump that we talk about. Like defenses will go around, the tackle will have to get in the way, and they got to go all the way around to the quarterback. So it's not the full one of those, but he is. I mean, he's positioned kind of head up on this guard. He's inside the formation, and this end takes the tackle way out, so one on one on the outside, and then he also then will fan out around it, and he does run his own hump here around the offensive line. So it's what we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about on the early part of the video. He's kind of like a big classic defensive end. You don't see a lot of big ends anymore. A lot of Michigan plays with very tiny defensive ends, but he has a body type to play inside, but he also has the versatility, the speed, the relentlessness, the violence, the motor, all the things required to be able to help on the outside and contain. Um, Talking about in this play, he's still lined up, and it's not like it's not a twist or anything. It's just the end goes around and he just follows it. But it shows that he can take that outside if he needs to with a twist stunt, having the end dive inside into an inside gap. So it just shows his ability to do multiple things. That kind of how Chance said he can do it all in a lot of aspects.
I think one of the things too, like to go along with what you're saying about him when we say classic end, we're thinking like the 1990s Reggie White style 4-3 defensive ends that got that around 300 pounds, 6'3", 6'4" size. Graham has that size, and what it makes me think right here, uh, I could really see him. I could see him playing a as a 3-4 end. I think that could work out for him.
Mhm.
And like with this one, I think that what's so interesting about this play is like it's his. I mean, to use what you said, I think it's his versatility that makes this play really interesting because he does come from that guard. He's like, I don't know, he maybe two, maybe two I. He's because he looks a little inside right here.
Yeah.
But what they do is it's not the same thing, but it's kind of a variation on what you'll see Georgia do a lot, especially whenever they've got a strong nose. That they'll find ways to lure one blocker out of position or maybe deeper than they should go to open up the gate for another rusher to come through. That really does happen here because 71 sets so deeply because of the end presses him upfield that Graham really runs the same stunt that this outside guy does. It's just a hard outside rush across the body of the guard, and he's faster than the guard, and he gets under, he makes that rip. And so really you've got essentially two typical defensive end rushes coming on that side of the line, and that's not what that a guard is used to blocking against. A guard is not really prepared to make that wide pass set like what a tackle will. And so I mean it's a good example, one of Mason Graham, having the athletic ability to do it, but it's also to go back to coaching. They know what they've got in him, and they also know that on a play like this, that guard is not prepared to make that kind of block because look how much space is out there. That's not what a guard typically does. So it's a good example, I think, of where scheme meets athlete, and it's pretty impressive what Michigan does right there.
And you can tell just kind of by technique, their defensive linemen, their interior guys and their exterior guys. If you watch the end and then you watch Graham, their steps and their movements, they're almost identical in the way that they move
Mm-hmm.
around this. So there is intentionality here with the technique and coaching of these guys that, hey, just because you're going to be the interior doesn't mean you still need to know how to get around the edge. You still need to know like what your steps are, like where you're leaning into, how you lower your shoulder, where your arms are going. I mean, this is really good lean for a big guy. He's leaning
It
kind of
is.
out of that. So just we continue to gush about this Michigan defense, but there's a good reason behind it, because typically you don't see an end and a tackle follow suit in almost an identical manner like this, but they both run it. And then they're both there to make the tackle, and then also just really
Mm-hmm.
good setup. You can tell that there's nowhere for him to go here. I mean, Graham is trying to lock down this angle. He's getting held, so I imagine if he's not getting held here, he completely locks down this little alley that you can see here that McCord does try and take, but it's just a great job by the defense, and then Graham in total just getting around and just showing his skill set here from a tackle standpoint all the way around like he's playing end.
Yeah, and moving on, we'll see Graham again, that 4-man front. Um, you'll see it be a specialty of his where he can just take on a block. And while he doesn't really have leverage and he's getting double teamed right here, he finds the ball carrier and squeezes down to the ball carrier. And you know what? He makes a tackle. But not only does he make the tackle, he makes the tackle with one arm while his other arm is being held and he's still being blocked.
Yeah, so that is not his gap. Like he's not responsible for that.
No, he's just flowing down because he reads the blocks
Right.
and he sees the ball and he flows and he still makes the tackle while even his arms held behind his back by the dude blocking him. So I mean, it's pretty impressive that this guy can do that, especially with the way he gets his body turned at the last second, right there. So it's pretty impressive, right there where he gets his body turned.
And then gets his arm on him.
Yep.
He has such a knack for keeping his eyes on where the ball is. So he's following the running back. So he reads the block. He knows where the ball should be going, but then his eyes are kind of trying to get around to this running back to see where he's going. He sees the back take off and he fights despite getting held and despite getting blocked. He fights to that point. And I mean, you can kind of see if he doesn't make this play, the linebacker who really should be responsible for the gap this ball is run into, he's not there to make it. So Graham fights to that other gap that he's not lined up in to make this play. Because I mean, this is still probably a tackle by the safety in the corner coming down and converging it. But this is 1st and 10, and you're looking at a 2nd and 2 probably if he doesn't make that play. And instead, you get 2nd and 5. So I mean, those yards matter a lot, and him just his high motor and just tenacity to get to where the ball is really a difference maker for him.
Yeah, while I don't think, that next year he'll be a first round draft pick, you give him 2 more years though, And with his high motor, his athleticism, his size, I think this dude could be something very special. Now, I think Grant is probably the better choice with, more upside just because of his natural God given abilities. But Graham is very good, at least technique wise, and has a high motor. This dude gets after it and goes and doesn't stop. He'll chase plays down 50 yards down the field. He doesn't care to do that. So, I mean, there's something to be said about that, having heart and care within the game.
I think too, you see, it's just in these clips. I mean, he's fun to watch. I mean, you can tell. Um, I bet you hear him all game long. Just, I mean, if you just watch his demeanor, he likes playing. He gets after it. I think that I think he'd be just a fun guy to have on your team. Really impressive. Um, and like you said, I mean, I don't know that it's fair to compare anybody to Kenneth Grant.
Mhm.
Uh, that's uh, that's a rare find. It really is. But that's no knock on what Mason Graham brings to Michigan and what he'll bring to an NFL team later. He's definitely got a skill set, and I think that he'll be able to make his own way. But next year, something I'm interested to see. There is so much attention being given to Grant. Uh, I would not be surprised to see Graham have some really good production because I think that he's good. Like what Chance said at the beginning of the film, I think he's good at winning the one on ones, and I think that the double teams that Grant is going to uh, basically demand in the coming season, I think it's going to really benefit Mason Graham. So it should be interesting to see what he does this next year for Michigan.
He's a guy that's not gonna he doesn't put up massive flashy numbers. Like he's has 7.5 tackles for loss. He's got 3 sacks. And of course he's playing in the interior, so you're not gonna see, normally you don't see big uh,
Right.
sack numbers from DTs. But tackles for losses is more where you see the number, and it's not super high, and his total tackles isn't even, like it doesn't stand out massively, but it's more about what he does is like in the engagement that he has when his hands shoot out onto the offensive line. We saw him on that one play where he moves a guard completely into the A gap and he takes up the B gap. And he probably gets credited for half a tackle there, but the end is the one who really makes that tackle. But if he doesn't do what he did, then that play is a much bigger gain for Ohio State. So you see a lot of what he does is not necessarily going to be shown on a stat sheet. Like he did, I think he won Rose Bowl MVP. So he had a higher stat game in that one, and I'm happy that he did because he gained a lot of recognition. I think a lot of people who didn't know his name learned it
Mm-hmm.
in that game. But overall in this season, understated kind of stats wise, but what he does is we talk about this complete defense, like team defense idea that Michigan has and how they all have a role and a responsibility. And he does his very, very well. And paired up with Grant right next to him, that's a great duo to build a defense around. You got two,
Yes.
big guys that do their jobs well, and they have different jobs. Despite playing a similar position, they do have different jobs and different skill sets, but they're able to do them very well. And you can build a really good defense around those two middle pieces because that's a hard little interior to run the ball against. Just flat out is. And I guarantee the linebackers who play right behind them, they love it when they see Graham and Grant in together because they know that they're going to be clean to make plays and fill in gaps because their guys in front of them are doing their jobs, getting hands on and fighting. So I mean, it's a testament to him. Even if his stats are not going to be super flashy, he is a great player and he deserves his flowers.
Yeah, I agree completely. This Michigan defense, it's a piece of work. It's something to watch. It's something to analyze. It's something to try to emulate. And I think that a lot of that starts on this defensive line. And like you said, I mean they came into their own in the Rose Bowl. Everybody learned something about that Michigan defensive line in that game. And and I'm glad we've had the opportunity to talk a bit about Grant, and tonight we've had the ability to talk about Graham. Both these guys look like they're going to have long careers in football. Is there anything else to be said? For Mason Graham tonight.
Yeah, I think he had a good year this year. I don't think that you can debate that. He had a really solid year, especially with him being a sophomore, very young guy. But I think the key thing with him is his future. And I think that's very bright. And there's a lot of upside for him because he's going to get bigger, he's going to get stronger, he's going to get faster. His technique is going to be more defined. And, he's going to come out next year and probably be a force to be reckoned with alongside Grant.
With that being said, thanks for tuning in with us. As always, we appreciate your support. Like our videos, share them, subscribe to the channel, and we'll keep producing more good content for you. Until then, stay locked in.